Yeah, I started doing this a little while ago because another speaker wanted to share it with their students.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh, let's just start doing Zoom. I learned that Zoom does YouTube automatically. So
That's
like,
cool.
why
I didn't
not?
know that. Yeah.
And then I learned the other benefits of an auto recording, and I don't have to edit on my computer, then upload it. And
Hmm.
so now I'm just doing it. And so people can share it. And it's been a pretty good hit. I think we have on average, about 20 people on the YouTube channel as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. That's good. We should like I think these are on your YouTube channel, which is fine. I don't care. But the
Yeah, it's on
college should
the,
like try and like bundle these or something and like fall
yeah, there's,
2020 consortium series, whatever.
yeah, there's a playlist. Yeah, it's on my like school one that I use because I do
Hmm.
my classes kind of hybrid style.
Right.
And there's a playlist there now that we're linking on on the university website.
Uh-huh.
Eventually, they're trying to get it to where we're going to have like a school YouTube.
Yeah, that would be good.
It'd be on there, but it's a whole thing. Augusta, the
It
university
is
like
a
to make
thing.
everything difficult.
Right. It's all about security. And yeah. And YouTube is Google and Augusta's Microsoft, so
Yeah, exactly.
can't get there from here.
Okay. So it looks like we're going on YouTube now. We got one person there.
All right. Oh, let me step out for just 1 second. Get going. Can you hear me? I was just thinking about the dean talking about farm animals in our meeting.
Yeah.
That's how I lost it.
I was actually wondering like how many. I got to wondering like how many people do have farm animals on the faculty. I don't think there's any.
No, but well, we need to get some.
No kidding.
He kind of expects us to have some. At least the South Carolina people, right?
Yeah, it looks like Melva was saying that your green screen picture is really nice.
Oh, thanks, Melba.
And I had said yes, the office rules.
Yes. Yeah, a couple when the pandemic started, I kind of Googled up like what are some good universal backgrounds,
Yeah.
and I found some pretty good ones. This is probably my go-to though.
Yeah, I don't ever use one. I just use my natural habitat as a.
Right. I'm working on my space, my home office. It's almost there. Not
That's
quite.
cool. Yeah, I'm in my home office too.
Mm-hmm. I got I was actually thinking about presenting while standing up. I got a stand-up desk here I got a couple weeks ago.
Yeah,
I really like it.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I've been using a standing desk for 6 years now.
Oh, have you? Wow.
Yeah, I'm standing at it right now. I'm standing up.
Are you standing?
Yeah.
You look like you're sitting. I guess you're leaning on it.
Yeah, I'm leaning. I got my legs crossed. One sec.
Let's see if I can. Going up.
Yeah, I've got the up desk, so it goes up and down.
Mm-hmm.
And I mostly stand though. I think I stand for 8 to 10 hours probably.
Yeah, I'm still getting used to it. This is my first standing desk ever, but I do like it.
No, I love it. I can't, like when I write like papers and stuff, when I'm writing, I can't write sitting down anymore. I like to write standing.
Really?
Yeah, it helps me think.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, it's 1 o'clock, so let's, we can go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for joining. I think this is the 8th colloquium, so we're halfway through the semester. Today I'm really excited to welcome Dr. Jason Williams, who is an assistant professor at Augusta University in the School of Computer and Cyber Sciences. He got his PhD in information systems from Kennesaw State and a MBA and BBA in information systems from Georgia Southern University. Were you there when President Kiel was president there?
I was, yeah.
Oh, great.
Well, I was a staff person at the time whenever he was there.
Oh, right. Okay. Jason's primary, or Dr. Williams' primary research centers on IT, use in organizations, and at the individual level, and includes theory development, mixed research methods. He was selected for the International Conference on Information Systems Doctoral Consortium, and he was published in the Research Journal Computer Information Systems and other leading conferences. He's come to Augusta University from being a professional IT person out in the field, and you were doing IT for 20 years, right, in the industry?
That's right.
And was an IT director of project management at Georgia Southern and CIO at Savannah Technical College. And so we got lots of really good expertise, and in his spare time, he likes to hang out with his wife, Rebecca, and their 4 children. So that's good.
Yep. And they've all left the house and left me alone in here today.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we have that situation like the guy on the news, or your kid just comes barging in.
Right.
And so today, Dr. Williams is going to be talking about developing distinct IT use constructs, literature analysis theory, and an empirical test. So thank you, and I'll let you take it from here.
All right. Thanks, Dr. Eads. I appreciate it, and thanks for having me in the series this fall. So just want to confirm that I'm sharing my screen and everybody can see that. You should see a title slide there.
Yep, I can see it.
So great, thanks. So about us, Dr. Eads did a great job of introducing me, but I also want to introduce my co-author, Shar Gupta. He's a professor of information systems at Kennesaw State University, and he is definitely instrumental in this research that I'll be presenting today. So thanks, Dr. Gupta. So you saw by the title that we're looking at IT use. And so the traditional way to always start this is, well, what is IT use? But right off the bat, there's actually a problem that there isn't a good definition of IT use, a consistent definition in the literature. So we tend to know what it is intuitively when we talk about it. You know, I'm using IT right now to make this presentation and so forth. But we don't have it nailed down the way we would like in the literature. What we do know about IT use from the literature is that it's called the most important construct in information systems research by a lot of people. And we also know that it's through IT use that we get the benefits of an IT system. So we can't just have it sitting on the shelf. We actually have to be employing it in some way in order to get any benefits out of that. So there's definition problems that I just kind of mentioned. There's also measurement problems in that IT use, whenever it is used in research, has not been measured consistently. And so these actually have names to these problems. They're called the jangle and jingle fallacies. And so because of these fallacies, we just have general problems with IT use. For example, people have studied IT use under several different names, such as adaptive system use, or automatic use, or continued use, or enhanced use, expectable use even, exploitive use. and the list kind of goes on. And so we find ourselves in all these niches, but not really getting our arms around IT use as a whole, as a phenomenon. So the result of that, because we can't put our arms around it as researchers, is that there's not a lot of practical meaning to IT use. Studies aren't as generalizable as we would like, and we don't have as much cumulative knowledge, which we'll see here. Because we're not only ill at defining IT use, we're also not consistent with using theory to explain IT use. So we see there's too many theories in the literature, leading to what Ben Bassett and Barkey call a patchwork of results. And there's also, because we have many theories, we're employing lots and lots of antecedents, which are precursors, things that lead to IT use. And so that leads to what they call an illusion of knowledge accumulation, and that we think we're learning a lot about the IT use phenomenon, but we're really not there. So because of that, things are less generalizable. We can't apply things, learnings from one study to another. And again, we don't have as much practical meaning in that things don't translate into the real world as well as we would like. So we have practitioner problems. When we add up all these antecedents of IT use and these definitions of IT use and all these ways to measure IT use, we can't give clear guidance to practitioners on how to incite a person on your team to use technology in a certain way, or to adopt a technology, or to get comfortable with that technology the way we would like to be able to do. And so, as researchers, if we're not having an impact on practitioners, then we've really got a problem. We need to really step back and think, how can we do this better? So we need to be clear on what IT use is and how it's measured. And we need to do that consistently so we can advise practitioners on how to lead in their organizations based on our research. So all that said, let's dive in a little bit more closely at what the literature says. So we conducted a literature analysis of the IT use literature. We looked at the definitions used there. We looked at the measurement loci, which are just the focus areas of the way those constructs are being measured. And we came out with two distinct types of IT use. And I've got some examples here on the right that we'll go through in just a second. So more often than not, when we're looking at definitions, that the IT use construct in the paper is actually not explicitly defined, as we see in the case on the left here. And so for the measurement side of this, I just included the loci that we have for these particular papers, but again, there's many other papers in this literature analysis that I'm kind of cutting out for time's sake. And so we found that there's actually two distinct types of IT use being studied. There's this idea on the left of continued use, where we talk about, or the literature talks about things like continuation and enhancement and quality and productivity. And then there's also this idea, like from Key et al., for exploratory use. It talks about things like discovery and innovation, new features, experimenting with those features, and so on. And so just kind of on the surface there, you can see that there's a difference between these two columns, between productivity and innovation, right? And so that led us to a few proposed definitions for this. So we proposed the definition of IT use as purposeful interaction with information technology. And then continued use, we defined, again, based on that literature review we did, use after the user has incorporated the technology into his or her work patterns. And then we define novel use as use when the users try to innovate what tasks they can do. And so we took these proposed definitions that sounded good to us and our research team, and we put those through what we call a Q-sort process. So we wanted to see if our definitions from that previous slide made sense to other people. And the Q-sort process, or card sorting as it sometimes is called, is a way to get validation for concepts like this. So real quick, I just explained the Q-sort, card sorting. You start with items that you get from some source. In this case, from our literature review, we took 130 items from the literature of different ways that IT use had been measured. We deduplicated those down into where we just had 58 actual distinct items. And then we invited participants to categorize those into types of use. So we had a continued use bucket, a novel use bucket, and a this doesn't fit with either of these bucket. And so in the old days, it was literally you had these on an index card and they would put them into the bucket that they thought fit, right? That's why it was called card sorting. We did it electronically using a website. And so you do this for a few rounds. And after every round, if something gets sorted poorly, like people say, oh, this is not, this doesn't match any of these definitions you're giving me, we throw that out. And so from that, you can calculate statistics on whether these people are agreeing and the definitions are converging or not. So the way you evaluate that is using the statistic slice kappa. And so that measures iterator reliability with multiple sorters sorting multiple items into multiple predefined groups. And so we can look at the results of that. So we started with a pilot round where we just tweaked some of our definitions and stuff based on the feedback of these 13 IT professionals. And then we reduced the set just a little bit based on the feedback of those IT professionals. And then from there, we actually did the official card sorting rounds where we had folks who used IT in their workplace, which is what we were focusing on here in this type of IT use, is workplace IT use. And so these rounds where you see 5 IT users, 4 IT users, 3 IT users, and so on, those are all distinct sets. So there's no overlapping members of these participant groups. And so after every round, we calculated the slice kappas for continued use and novel use sorting. And so as we reduced the sets of items, we got down to significant results for continued use and especially for novel use. So we were pleased with that. So in the end, I forgot to mention, that's the kappa for 10 items kept for study 2, which I'll talk about next. And these are those 10 items with their sources. So we see the items here are found in the literature and how they were sorted by the participants in the card sorting exercise. They're sourced from the literature, and then the construct that that source in the literature called that item. So we see there's some commonality there with such as like novel use and exploration and adaptive system use. So we feel like we were being pretty true to the literature as well as to the results of the study after we came with these results. So next, we looked at theories, as I mentioned a couple of slides ago. And so we looked at the theories in the literature, and we noticed that they were mostly psychology theories based on the perceptions of the users of the technologies. But we also saw that there were a few studies that use sociology type theories, which sociology takes outside influence into account as well from organizations or from cultures or so forth. Similarly, we We looked at the antecedents, which are, again, the precursors to IT use. And so from those, we saw that most of the antecedents were psychological in nature. They were internal to the person, being personal perceptions. And some of those, however, were also sociological or external in nature. And typically, because we're using IS literature, those took the form of manager or organizational influences. So what we found from this analysis is that we need a theory to explain IT use that can use both psychology theories and sociology theories. We need to capture all of these antecedents. And just a real quick example of some of the antecedents we did find. Whenever people were studying continued use, they used constructs like user satisfaction and test technology fit and trust. When they were studying novel use, they looked at perceived power, perceived voluntariness, and computer self-efficacy. So based on these and other constructs, we know that we have to incorporate these kinds of constructs into a model. They need to be both sociological and psychological based, and as well as we need to cover both of these types of use with a model. So next, we looked at the meta theory options we had available. And so we know that we need to study based on a socio-technical perspective. That's where human actors and technology-enabled processes come together. We need to conceptualize the people because IT use is done by people, and the technology-enabled processes, which is the goals or the outcomes or the tasks that are being completed by these people using technology. So that's a foundational perspective to the IS discipline. And so we looked we looked a little more at the socio-technical perspective, and we see how it also has external forces and perceptions brought together under one set of theories. And so one of the theories that really stood out to us as we looked for meta theories to help ground our theory development was adaptive structuration theory, or AST. And so AST takes into account external forces through what it calls structural dimensions, and it takes into account personal perceptions in what it calls modalities. And so what we'll see in the next slide is structural dimensions and modalities being kind of broad categories, if you will, of these types of antecedents as we work on the theory development. So based on our research, we modeled this diagram to help us put our thoughts on paper about IT use, especially in the workplace. There's a lot going on here, and for the sake of time, I'm only going to focus on what's kind of in the orange box there with the hypotheses. We did model the other relationships, such as that top row, or moves across the bottom, benefits on the right, reciprocal causation across the top. But the present paper we're working on confines itself to the orange box. So that's what I'm going to focus on with the model that I'm going to present next. There are a couple of things to point out here with this. There's structures on the left, that kind of number 4 right there. Structures are the stimuli that agents take in from the environment, that users take in, and then process into modalities, which are in that middle column there. The modalities are their perceptions. And so based on our meta theory, we broke structures into 2 types, legitimation and domination. Those are the words that are used by AST. And so the structural dimension of legitimation is the extent to which rules regarding IT allow for sanctions. They establish the importance of the technology in achieving work goals. The structure of legitimation also provides incentives such as like salary bonuses or tools for routinization or efficiency. The structural dimension of domination on the bottom left there is the extent to which resources allow for the conduct of IT use. So users who have more resources are more likely to perceive that they have control over those resources, and more resources allocated to a user will provide a greater incentive for that user to try and control that technology in some way. So the antecedents from a couple of slides ago will be used to measure norms and facility in the modality section in the middle. And so norm modalities can be defined as beliefs that the structures provide efficiency toward achieving existing work goals. And facility is defined as perception of one's ability to influence and allocate resources. Resources, again, coming from the structures of domination. So real quick, just to kind of summarize all that in the theory talk, there's things from the outside world, structures of structural dimensions, influence people. People process that through their modalities, and then based on that, their thoughts and perceptions of that stuff, they do things, which is the interaction in these two use types that we identified in our Q-sort process. So with that theory background, this is the research model that we put together. So we see norms and facility there. We actually modeled those as higher order reflective constructs. And we use those established reflective measures from the literature. So example, user satisfaction, TTF perception, trust in technology, that was all on the slides a couple of slides ago. The same with computer self-efficacy and power and voluntariness. So we argue that these are individual modalities of this higher order construct of norms or facility. The dimensions of legitimation and domination, they're on the left, are new formative constructs, and we'll talk more about those in a few slides. There on the right, you see our hypotheses of that norms and facility each influence continued use and novel use. And so our hypotheses are that we think norms and facility will both influence continued use, but our hypothesis is that norms will have a greater influence on continued use than facility. And the same for novel use. We think both norms and facility will influence that, but we think that facility will have the greater impact on novel use. So that's what we mean when we have those kind of dotted lines there. It's the two lines going into continued use, comparatively speaking. All right. So we took this into a survey. And so I talked about the measures, or most of the measures, but I want to add one other thing in that we had a technology selection option in this survey where the participants selected one of these 4 items, Microsoft Office, enterprise systems, web browsers, or collaboration systems, to be the basis for their use, the kind of the grounding of their use. So anytime there was a question presented to the user about a technology, we substituted in Microsoft Office or enterprise systems into that question based on their response to this initial technology question, so that it helped ground them into a specific technology and they would be more consistent in their responses. We also used a lot of controls in this survey. I won't go into all of them because most of them actually became insignificant. The only one that did stay significant was personal innovativeness with information technology, PIIT. And so I just left it on the slide here to know that we did do controls, and this was the one that was significant. So I won't talk about the others for time. So to do this survey, we did a Qualtrics panel. And so That's an online survey method where people completed the survey by a computer. And so we had 386 respondents to the survey. And we had, based on our samples and our data we analyzed from our sample, that respondents were pretty well spread out across gender, age, education, industry, technology experience, and technology use in their current job. So we had a pretty good, pretty widespread sample with our sample frame of 386. We conducted the analysis for this data using PLS-SEM, and specifically we used the Smart PLS 3.2.9 tool to do that. All right, so now a word of caution. This is research that's still ongoing, and we haven't completely done the data analysis yet. So what I'm going to show you is preliminary analysis. And as we go, I'll kind of note where we think we can improve things and things might change. So we'll start our analysis with the measurement model. We'll first look at legitimation and domination structural dimensions. Then we'll look at the lower order constructs. And then the higher order constructs in the structural model will come next. Then we'll look at the structural results. And then finally, we'll look at the importance performance map analysis, IPMA. And then based on the structural results and the IPMA, we'll combine those two pieces of information and we'll evaluate hypotheses based on that. So here's the legitimation items and its weights. The legitimation construct, remember, is predicted to be an antecedent of norms. The basis for these items came from existing literature and from theory. And I'm kind of shortcutting some of that for our time today. We did do a global indicator analysis for both this construct and the domination construct, and both constructs were valid. What you see here are the weights from the measurement model. So we see all these are significantly loading on the construct, which is good. So here's the same thing for the domination item and its weights. Again, we have no issues here. Everything is loading very well, and these are really good numbers. Again, these items specifically, they all came from literature about, like, for example, there's the item here, my organization mandates continuous learning. We see learning as a way to increase skills for the technology all over the literature, and so we included an item based on that. Okay, so now moving on to the reflective constructs. We first look at the lower order constructs in that top table. We see the reflective constructs. We calculated their Cronbach's alpha, their construct reliability score, the average variance extracted, and then we looked at the Fournier-Locker criterion to see how discriminant validity worked out. And so there's a couple of things to note here. One, if you look at the alpha for the CSE construct in that row, CSE construct in general, really, it's kind of behaving oddly for CSE. CSE is a very well-known, pretty well understood construct, but for some reason in this literature, or excuse me, in this study, it did not have as high an alpha as we would expect, and had a pretty low average variance extracted. As of right now, we don't have a good reason for that, and so we're still searching for an explanation for that one. We also see in this that there's some covariance among TTF, trust, and user satisfaction. You can see that in the Fournier-Locker table. Those top three rows, you expect that the square root of the AVE, the bold on the diagonal there, to be always higher than the numbers that are in that table that are not bolded. And we can see that that's not quite the case when it comes to these. We have a lot of covariance between trust and user satisfaction and test technology fit. That's not completely unexpected because these are all reflective constructs. And so we're modeling that these constructs are all part of the same higher order construct. And so they should correlate to some degree. And so we see that happening especially with TTF trust and user satisfaction. So we're going to continue to analyze that a little bit more and see if we can't figure out a better way to define those or to model those where it's not quite so high, but it's not completely unexpected. Let's see, anything else I want to say? Okay, so that's enough for the lower order constructs. And then the bottom table is the main model construct. So what we did was to use latent variable scores of those first order, lower order constructs to become items for the higher order constructs of norms and facility you see on the top two rows of the main model constructs table. And things go pretty well there. We would like to see facility have a little bit higher alpha and AVE, but we're not sure if we can get there or not. But that's one of the areas we're working on as well. But in general, we see good discriminant validity here and good convergent validity, especially in the main model constructs. So after doing that measurement model, here's the structural results from our structural equation modeling. So you see we have lots of significant relationships here. Overall, we have an SRMR of 0.9, which is considered good. You see the adjusted R-squares for our two target variables of continued use and novel use are also relatively high, so that's positive. We also calculated with this Q-square, which is the predictive relevance. We use blindfolding to do that. We see good path coefficients there, as well as good effect size. So so far, looking at our hypothesis testing, we see hypothesis 1 has, which is the two arrows going into the continued use construct. We see that both norms and facility influence continued use. Norms more so, but facility still has a very strong influence, which is a little bit unexpected, and we'll come back to that in a second. Going into novel use, we see that facility has much stronger influence than norms, which is good, as predicted. We see from legitimation to norms, we see a strong relationship there as well. And then the fourth hypothesis, from domination to facility, we also see as a strong relationship. We also notice PIT on the far right as a control is not significant for continued use, but it is significant for novel use, and strongly so, which is interesting. So one of the last pieces of analysis we did was importance performance map analysis, which you can see here. And so this is a technique to evaluate the relative effects of one construct on another in a model. And so we have two things going on this slide. This, the first table over there on the left, is the continued use. So this asks the question, what constructs affect the continued use construct the most? And so the farther right you are on this table, the more influence you have. And so if we look to the far right, we see that light blue, and that's norms, and that's expected based on theory and hypothesis. Remember from our previous slide that both norms and facility had a significant relationship with continued use. But you can see facility there, the red dot, is a pretty good bit lower, or further to the left, I should say, than norms. So that's hypothesis 1. Hypothesis 2, we can help evaluate through the novel use IPMA. And so there, we predict facility to have the most important or the greatest effect on novel use, and you see that there in the red circle. So taking the importance performance into mind, as well as the structural model, here's our hypothesis evaluation so far. Hypothesis 1, what is influencing continued use, is partially supported. We have good evidence of support from the IPMA, but the structural model disagrees with that. So we're calling that partially supported, since we kind of have a bit of a mixed message there. The influences, however, on novel use are pretty clear, that facility modalities support novel use very well. And then hypothesis 3 and 4 are the influences between the structures and the modalities. And so those are both supported as well, as we saw from the structural equation modeling results. Next, we'll talk about contributions that we see from this research. So our contributions we see being pretty varied, honestly. First off, from our structural model, we see that we have a similar R-square as Utah for initial use. So if you're not familiar with that paper, Utah is a bit of a seminal work, very widely cited, very well-regarded work for adoption of technology. And so the R-square that we got for continued use and novel use is in line with what that research got for initial use. And so that's really encouraging to see that this is having a strong influence on our target use constructs. So we would recommend that folks use Utah to study initial use, and the current model that we presented here for continued and novel use. We were able to resolve the jangle fallacy from Larson and Bong by developing that overall definition of IT use that was validated through the research. We also developed distinct IT use types that are exhaustive and mutually exclusive. We also resolved the jingle fallacy by developing validated measures for continued and novel use, which we saw coming out of that Q-sort as well. And then we validated those through this survey that we did. So structural dimensions allow for a given structure to exhibit one or more structural dimensions at a time. I didn't talk much about that. That's a little bit in the weeds on the theory side, but that allows us to expand what we can do with adaptive structuration theory, our meta theory, and be able to classify a structure, which would be an item in the case of this research, one of those items as belonging to a particular structural dimension, which hasn't been done before. We also identified the modalities of norms and facility as higher order constructs for existing perception constructs in the literature. So this allows us to reinterpret and reclassify existing literature that have used these constructs through this lens that we've provided here in this theory. So for implications, this is for managers and how we can influence practice. We see that for job descriptions, we should focus on one structural dimension only. So managers could direct job applicants and incumbents towards a specific type of use, for example, by including specific words and phrases from our items in job descriptions to help find people who would be better at novel use or continued use. And specifically when it comes to novel use, I mentioned earlier that PIT was very strongly associated with novel use, but not for continued use. And so what that allows us to do, PIT is a very well understood construct. It's like got 3 or 4 items to it. And so managers could test candidates who need to engage in novel use for PIT, and if they score highly on that PIT scale, they would be probably a good candidate to consider for someone who needs to be in a novel use type position, so an innovation type position. We can also have implications for training, that whenever training users, they should be trained specifically for continued use or novel use. So that means trainers should only try and say things and do things that are associated with one of the dimensions, either norms or facility, in order to produce, domination or legitimation, in order to produce the modalities of norms or facility that are desired in the training. So you don't want to send mixed signals here. You want to stay consistent to continued use training or novel use training, but not both. And then finally, change management initiatives should focus on producing computer self-efficacy and perceived power modalities. Not so much perceived voluntariness, because that's not a strong modality from our structural results. So, but CSE and perceived power were very strong. So if you want to empower people and get them to go along with change and buy into the changes that are being recommended by management, help them produce computer self-efficacy and help them perceive their own powers, and then they will be more likely to go along with you on that. Finally, future work. We need to continue the data analysis and refine this model. As I described a few slides ago, we also need to add structures of legitimation and nomination source in the technology. So the items that I showed you earlier were all sourced in the organization or in the industry. And so there's a whole nother set of structures that could be sourced from the technology itself. And so we could include those in the research as well and further strengthen the model and have a very strong foundation of the technology in the model and how the technology itself incites users to produce continued or novel use. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening this afternoon. I really do appreciate your time and your patience. I appreciate any feedback or questions you have as well. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. I thought it was a very interesting talk. It's definitely outside of my area of expertise, but it was interesting learning about what kind of things you are working on. Mm-hmm. Does anybody have any questions for the speaker today? All right, I guess not.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate everyone coming, and I'm sure if you end up having questions, that Jason will be happy to take them offline.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right.
All right. Thank you.